The witnesses we have today are Mr. Art Arthur. He's the resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. Prior to that, Mr. Arthur served in the Immigration and Naturalization Service General Counsel's office as a counsel in the House Judiciary Committee, as an immigration judge, and as staff director for the National Security Subcommittee for the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. He earned a J.D. from George Washington School of Law and a bachelor's at the University of Virginia. Mr. Tom Homan is the former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement during the Trump administration, serving in senior roles at ICE during several administrations. He has 34 years of experience in federal immigration enforcement, and he currently serves as a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Next is Mr. Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. Mr. Reichlin-Melnick is currently the policy director at the American Immigration Council, where he's also served as a policy counsel and a staff attorney. Prior to that, he was a justice fellow on the Immigrant Justice Corps and the Legal Aid Society in New York. He earned a J.D. at Georgetown University Law Center and a bachelor's at Brandeis University. He's here at the invitation of the minority. And finally, we have Mr. Gene Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton serves as a Vice President and General Counsel of American First Legal. Prior to that, Mr. Hamilton served as counselor to the Attorney General at the Department of Justice during the Trump administration. He previously served as senior counselor to the Secretary of Homeland Security and as general counsel to the senator on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Mr. Hamilton earned his J.D. from the Washington and Lee School of Law and his bachelor's from the University of Georgia. I'd like to welcome these witnesses today, thank them again for appearing, and we'll begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. And please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we'd ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes, and we'll begin with Mr. Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just don't want to correct the chairman. I never actually served in the Trump administration. I served from the George H.W. Bush administration through President Barack Obama. Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Jayapal, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today. The topic is timely, as we are in the midst of an unprecedented border crisis. Every month, tens of thousands are apprehended at the southwest border, even while more than 43,000 others, without visas, schedule appointments at the border ports. The vast majority are released, which, as a federal judge found last March, is driving the border crisis. And that doesn't count tens of thousands who evade agents monthly, so-called gotaways. Their entries are imposing billions in fiscal costs on states and localities for housing, healthcare, education, and other expenses. And as the 2024 DHS Homeland Security Threat Assessment has explained, this crisis has created a vulnerability, quote, terrorists and criminal actors may exploit, close quote. The Constitution and the Immigration and Nationality Act provide the President with numerous and sufficient authorities to bring security to the border, which I discussed at length in my written testimony. Key, however, is detention, which has been mandated for aliens at the ports since 1903 and for unlawful entrants since 1996. Unlike preceding administrations, the current one has largely failed to comply with those statutory mandates, instead ending family detention entirely, while asking Congress for fewer detention beds in succeeding budgets and claiming they'll be sufficient to comply with DHS's statutory mandates. They're not. The DHS Secretary, under 8 United States Code Section 1368B, is supposed to tell this committee every 6 months how many beds the department needs to meet those requirements. If it has sent you those semi-annual reports, it's news to me. But Congress must fund that detention and the resources needed to adjudicate those aliens' cases and removals. That will be costly at first, but those costs will quickly drop as entries drop. As long as illegal entrants know they'll be released to live and work here indefinitely, pending the adjudication of their asylum claims, they'll continue to come. Detention also allows DHS to screen out those with valid asylum claims and remove the rest. As importantly, it would shift the costs of caring for those migrants from the cities and states to the federal government where it belongs. Such detention must be humane and provide those housed sustenance, medical care, and education. As a judge, I had jurisdiction over a family center that exceeded all of those standards. A 2015 district court order in Flores versus Lynch, however, prevents DHS from housing families for more than 20 days. I respectfully disagree with the conclusions therein. In 2019, a federal bipartisan panel concluded that the children in those families are traumatized by the illegal journey here, and that parents and children alike are particularly vulnerable to criminal predation. The panel found that Flores had exacerbated the pull factors drawing those migrants to this country and called on Congress to reverse it by legislation. Failing that, it asked DHS to issue regulations replacing that order and allowing for family migrant detention. The last administration did so, only to have those regulations enjoined. The incoming Biden administration failed to seek Supreme Court review and has also failed to issue regulations of its own. More than 1.8 million family aliens have been apprehended at the southwest border since February 2021. The administration can also use diplomacy to encourage its regional partners to secure their own borders, which would deter new arrivals from abroad. The U.S. accounts for 25% of global GDP and is Mexico's most important trading partner. Reports suggest that the Biden administration has used its diplomatic power to encourage greater enforcement in that country, but more can be done. Last May, the administration did attempt to restrict asylum for aliens entering illegally, and until recently was fighting court challenges against it. Last month, however, DOJ asked the courts to pause those cases pending settlement negotiations. I commend to you the February 21 order in one of those cases, East Bay Sanctuary Covenant versus Biden, and in particular the dissent by Judge Lawrence Van Dyke. I take no position on the claims that Judge Van Dyke makes, but in any event, it's incumbent on DOJ and DHS to coordinate any administrative action securing the border to ensure challenges will be litigated forcefully into a conclusion. In September 1994, Barbara Jordan, former member of this committee and chairman of the U.S. Committee on Immigration Reform, appeared before this subcommittee and warned that, quote, if we cannot control illegal immigration, we cannot sustain our national interest in legal immigration. Look at the polling, talk to your constituents, and you'll see that's what's happening today. That's bad because America needs immigration, albeit on the terms Congress has established. The administration and this Congress can and must do more to secure the border. The stakes are too high not to. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm next pleased to welcome Mr. Tom Homan back before this committee.
All right, you have my written statement. I'm not going to read an oral statement. I'm just going to talk. I started as a Border Patrol agent in 1984, and I became a special agent, climbed the ranks, become the first ICE director that actually came up through the ranks. I worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. I've seen a lot of policies come and go. I see policies that worked, policies that didn't. Every president I ever worked for took border security serious. Clinton and Obama took it serious. They took steps to secure the border because they understood, like every other president, you can't have strong national security if you don't have strong border security. But understand this, President Biden is the first president in the history of this nation who came in office and unsecured the border on purpose by signing over 90 executive orders, abolishing everything we did that were successful policies. And the result of that is over 1,700 aliens have died entering this country. Historic record. 340 no-inspected terrorists off the terrorist watch list have been arrested. Southern border, almost twice as many in northern border. Historic record. 114,000 people have died from fentanyl overdoses. That's coming across an open border. An historic record. Sex trafficking of women and children. 600% increase. Historic record. Over 450,000 children have crossed this border with the use of cartels. This administration has lost track of almost 100,000 of them. We know where they are. We found some in forced labor. We found some in sex trafficking. We found some in death bondage. On top of that, we got 1.9 million known gotaways. Not a guess. Known gotaways, 1.9. Border Patrol's arrested people from 181 different countries. Some of these countries are sponsors of terror. They've arrested 340 on the southern border. How many of that 1.9 came from countries sponsoring terror? If you think it's 0, you're wrong. At the same time he destroyed the border, he abolished ICE. I said for a long time, they're never going to abolish ICE. They'll never abolish a federal agency. Well, they didn't abolish the agency. They abolished their mission. And the latest victim of that, her name is Laken Riley, a young woman who was murdered by an illegal alien in Georgia, a young lady who tried to call 911 because she was about to enter hell, because she'd being attacked by somebody. She was living in terror the last few minutes. You got to think of the way this young lady died. Horrific murder, death. She tried to get help. She fought for her life, and she died. And she's one out of so many. I've met hundreds of angel moms and dads through my career, hundreds. And how did this administration fail Laken Riley? First of all, the perpetrator should never have been in the country. He shouldn't have been in New York. He shouldn't have been in Georgia. He should have been in Mexico in the Remain in Mexico program that this administration abolished. Even if they didn't have the Remain in Mexico program, he should have been detained. When he entered the country illegally without proper documentation, the law says you shall be detained. Not maybe, shall. He was released. And then New York City, he was arrested for a crime. And you read the newspaper and say, well, New York City's at fault because they're a sanctuary city. Well, that's part of the story. But the other part of the story, let's say they didn't release him. Based on this memorandum by Secretary Mayorkas on ICE priorities, ICE wouldn't have dropped a detainer on him anyways, because he wasn't bad enough criminal for ICE to drop a detainer on him. Even though the law says there's no prerequisite to commit a crime after you commit the crime of illegal entry to be a target for enforcement. But Secretary Mayorkas has taken a lot of criminal aliens off the table for ICE. And how do I know that? By sheer numbers. 57% decrease in arrested criminal aliens under this administration. 68% decrease in at-large arrest of criminal aliens. 44% decrease in detainer requests for criminal aliens. 67% decrease in deportations of criminal aliens. 55% decrease in immigration-related criminal convictions. Laken Riley was just released, was just the latest victim. There will be another one next week. Matter of fact, there's been 2 since her. And when we leave her today, nothing's going to change. This administration wants to secure the border. They've had 3 years to take action. Why do they wait now? Well, there must be an election coming up. Then they come up with a bill in Senate that they know will never pass the House, so they can say, well, now it's the Republicans' fault. And they want to blame President Trump for his actions. People say President Trump's inhumane. Tom Homan's inhumane. We're racist. When Trump had illegal immigration at a 45-year low, how many women didn't get raped? How many children weren't lost? How many women and children weren't sex trafficked? How many pounds of fentanyl didn't get in the country to kill Americans? President Trump's policy saved lives. Bottom line, the data shows it. And this administration has destroyed the most secure border I've seen in my lifetime in 34 years doing this job. And that's just a stone cold fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll next hear from Mr. Reichlin Melnick.
Chairman Jordan, Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Jayapal, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Aaron Reichlin Melnick. I'm the Policy Director at the American Immigration Council, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the belief that immigrants are part of our national fabric and to ensuring that the United States provides a fair process for all immigrants, including those seeking protection. There should be no doubt that we need new laws and more resources to respond to the current situation at the border. The last time Congress made any major changes to the asylum process was 1996, when the Macarena was still a hit dance craze and the main concern at the border was Mexican laborers seeking work. Our asylum system was designed in a largely pre-digital age before the rise of social media, smartphones, translation apps, and a world that has become smaller than ever. Over the last decade, presidential authority to address the border has been stretched as far as it can go and often taken beyond what the law allows. Every president over the last 20 years, from Bush through Biden, has called for changes in the law and for more resources. Even President Trump previously said in 2018 that, quote, the only long-term solution, end quote, was for Congress to act. But despite decades of bipartisan agreement that Congress needs to legislate, with, of course, stark disagreements as to how, in recent months an unusual theory has taken hold, that the president can shut the U.S.-Mexico border to migrants with the stroke of a pen and no help from Congress. This theory is fundamentally wrong. No such authority exists, not even Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which in 2018 President Trump tried and failed to use to shut the border. But even if there were some overlooked law on the books which authorized the president to turn away everyone, operational and diplomatic limitations prevent any president from simply shutting the border overnight. First, U.S. and international law still require a screening for anyone who expresses a fear of persecution before deportation, even if asylum itself is banned. And without enough asylum officers to carry out those screenings, even a policy which bars asylum to all migrants can only be applied at the border to a limited number of people. This is not theoretical. In May, the Biden administration restricted asylum for nearly all migrants crossing the border outside ports of entry. But even though DHS is currently setting new records for credible fear interviews, nearly double the number of credible fear interviews done under the Trump administration, lack of asylum officers means that most people crossing can't have this restriction applied until years later in court in front of an immigration judge. And other issues exist too. Many migrants arriving at the border today cannot be deported at all because there is no country that is willing to take them. For example, Venezuela, a country which we have subject to intense sanctions, has for years retaliated by barring direct U.S. deportation flights. Fewer than 3,000 Venezuelans have been deported via commercial airlines in the last decade, and when the Biden administration briefly got Venezuela to restart deportation flights, they ended in a matter of months because once again the Maduro regime cracked down on elections and stopped the planes. So how do we fix this? Well, hiring more immigration judges and asylum officers is an easy first step. A robust infusion of resources over time will eliminate bottlenecks and allow us to carry out basic screenings and decide asylum cases in months, not years. But we also need innovative thinking about restructuring the system for modern challenges that we face today. For example, migrants must wait years for their cases to be heard in the system that is backlogged as it is. But back in 1996, we made it illegal for asylum seekers to work and support themselves in the months after they arrive. If asylum seekers could work, they wouldn't have to sit around in shelters all day, and they could support themselves. And if the federal government played a leading role in coordinating arrivals, cities could work together and tap federal resources to get people on their feet as they go through the process with limited impact on local budget and an improvement of the process for everyone. Beyond providing sufficient resources to reestablish a functioning asylum system, Congress must also pay attention to our legal immigration system, which is plagued with backlogs and rising costs. Not only are we driving away the world's best and brightest, but our broken legal immigration system helps unscrupulous actors sell migrants on the idea that the asylum system is their only way to seek the American dream. Over the last decade, we've seen presidents try more and more aggressive crackdowns and ramped up enforcement. It has not worked. So today, Congress has a choice. Do we kick the can down the road yet again, or do we do the one thing that we haven't tried and rebuild our broken asylum system, hiring more asylum officers, cutting backlogs, and giving people a fair shot? I urge legislators to address this issue with the seriousness it deserves and not to fall for a myth that can be solved overnight. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
And finally, we'll hear from Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Jayapal, other members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today about this important issue. Laken Riley, Kayla Hamilton, Kate Steinle, Elizabeth Medina, Melissa Powell, and her son Reardon. These are just a few of the Americans who have been killed by illegal aliens who should not have been in the United States. And these are tragically just a few victims, not to mention the countless victims of assault, sexual assault, human trafficking, smuggling, and other crimes affecting American communities across the United States, as my colleague Mr. Homan articulated. Congress has provided the president and the executive branch with significant, powerful tools that can secure the border. Unfortunately, the situation we see today, the chaos, the crime, the overwhelmed cities and states, and the tearing apart of the very fabric of our nation, is the result of deliberate, intentional policy decisions made throughout the Biden administration since January 20th of 2021. President Biden himself bears responsibility for the situation today. The Biden administration has abandoned reason, common sense, and fidelity to the law when it comes to our immigration system. They have opted to end effective immigration enforcement policies employed by prior administrations of both political parties, and knowingly adopted policies that facilitate the entry of millions of illegal aliens into the United States. No society can thrive, much less sustain itself, under the pressures and damage caused by these decisions. As a country defined by our commitment to the rule of law, and given our exceptional position in recorded human history, we must acknowledge some fundamental principles when it comes to border security and our immigration system. Every country has a sovereign right and responsibility to control its borders, and the United States is no different. The United States is the greatest country in the world, and hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people worldwide would come here if they could. But we cannot accommodate even a fraction of those people. Most illegal aliens are not asylum seekers. Deporting illegal aliens from the United States advances our national sovereignty and is an essential component of our immigration system. Further, doing so accords due respect for the individuals who obey our laws and come through the legal established visa programs. For those individuals who do not intend to use our visa system but want to come to the United States anyways, only one thing matters: getting released into the interior of the United States. And of course then, releasing illegal aliens into the interior of the United States fundamentally results in more illegal aliens trying to come to the United States. The Biden administration's publicly available data demonstrate that southwest border encounters are at record highs. The overwhelming majority of illegal aliens encountered at the southwest border are released into the interior of the United States. The Biden administration is adding millions of illegal aliens into the population who are already here. They know that using tools like migrant protection protocols, asylum cooperative agreements, expedited removal, visa sanctions on countries that refuse to take back their nationals, detention of aliens who are apprehended at the border pending the outcome of their immigration court proceedings, and other effective uses of law would end the crisis at the border relatively quickly. But they don't actually want an end to this crisis. I'm happy to answer your questions, and thank you for your attention to this matter.